the last starlight of Ered Luin. The sun sank low over the jagged peaks of Ered Luin, its crimson rays spilling across the ancient woods of Linden, once the refuge of the Eldar. Beneath the shadowed boughs, the elves of the Noldor prepared for war, their shimmering mail catching the fading light like fragments of fallen stars. Here, in the westernmost reach of Middle-earth, a dark tide crept from the north. Orcish warbands, led by Gracthul the Ravager, a cunning servant of Morgoth's lingering malice, had emerged from the ruins of Angmar. Their aim was to seize the green havens of Linden, to despoil the fair halls of Mithlond, and to sever forever the link between the elves and the undying lands. The Lord Giltharion, a descendant of the House of Fingolfin, stood at the forefront of the elven host. His silver hair streamed in the evening breeze, and in his hand gleamed Lomea Star, the blade of twilight, a weapon forged in forgotten ages by the master smith Celebrimbor. His eyes, deep as the wells of Varda, swept over his warriors, the Sindar archers with their gray cloaks blending into the trees, the golden-haired Galadrim with their shining helms, and the stoic Noldor with their sharp lances. Giltharion turned to his lieutenant, Elenian, a young but valiant elf with the fire of Valinor in his spirit. Elenian, the hour is upon us. Send word to the watch on the ridge of Niniak. We must not let the orcs descend unchecked. Yes, my lord, Elenian replied, bowing swiftly. He disappeared into the twilight, a shadow among shadows. The siege of Niniak, the ridge of Niniak, a natural bastion of granite and wildflowers, formed the gateway to the inner vales of Linden. It was there, in the deep hours of the night, that the orcs struck. Their drums echoed like thunder, and their torches turned the night into an inferno of malice. Elenian and his scouts were the first to encounter the enemy. The orcs, emboldened by their numbers, surged up the ridge in a relentless wave. Screaming curses in the black speech, they swung jagged blades and hurled crude spears. But the elves were prepared. From the tree line above, Sindar archers loosed volleys of silver-tipped arrows, each shaft finding its mark. The cries of dying orcs pierced the night like the keening of a storm. Elenian, standing firm amidst the chaos, fought with the grace of a dancer. His twin blades, Caladhen and Angalas, flashed like falling stars, cutting through the foul creatures that dared approach. But for every orc that fell, two more took its place. The arrival of Giltharion. As the tide of battle turned dire, a silver horn rang out across the ridge. Giltharion had come. Leading a host of Noldor warriors, he charged into the fray, his banner, a white star upon a field of blue, blazing with an unearthly light. "Hold fast, my kin," he cried. "For Linden, for the light of Arendil." The arrival of the reinforcements turned the battle. The disciplined ranks of the Noldor held firm, their long spears forming an unbreakable wall. Behind them, the Sindar and Galadrim unleashed death upon the orcs. Yet Gracthul himself entered the field, a towering beast clad in black iron. In his hand was a mace forged in the fires of Mount Gundabad, and with it he shattered elven shields and sundered their lines. Giltharion met him in single combat, Lomea Star singing as it clashed with Gracthul's dark weapon, the fall and the triumph. Their duel was one of light against darkness, a clash that seemed to shake the very stones of Niniak. Giltharion struck with precision, each blow guided by centuries of skill. But Gracthul was relentless, his brute strength overpowering finesse. With a mighty swing, the Orc Lord's mace caught Giltharion's side, sending him sprawling. "Your light will fade, Elf Lord," Gracthul roared, raising his weapon for the killing blow. But before it could fall, Elenian leapt onto the Orc Lord's back. With Angelus, he drove deep into the beast's neck. Gracthul bellowed in agony, staggering before collapsing into the bloodied grass. The sight of their leader's death broke the orcs' resolve. They fled into the darkness, harried by elven arrows. Victory belonged to the Eldar, though it came at a great cost. The aftermath. Dawn broke over Ered Luin, painting the battlefield in hues of gold and crimson. The ridge of Niniak was littered with the fallen, both elf and orc. Giltharion, though gravely wounded, stood once more, leaning upon Elenion for support. "Elenion," he said weakly, "you have proven yourself this night. The light of Valinor burns bright in you. Remember this moment, for it is not the blade, but the spirit that turns the tide of darkness." Elenion nodded, his face solemn but proud. Around them, the surviving elves began to sing a lament for the fallen, their voices rising like a prayer to Elbereth. "The starlight endures." Word of the victory at Niniak spread across Lindon, and the threat of Grakthul's horde was extinguished. Yet the Eldar knew that the shadow of Morgoth would rise again, for darkness is persistent. Giltharion, though scarred, returned to Mithlond to prepare his people for the trials to come. Elenion, now a hero of Lindon, took his place as a leader among the warriors of Ered Luin. And as the stars shone above the ridge of Niniak, the elves took solace in the knowledge that even in the deepest night their light would not falter. For they were the Eldar, the keepers of the starlight, and their song would endure until the breaking of the world. Part 2. Shadows of Ered Luin. Elenion's Resolve. After the battle, Elenion stood upon the ridge of Niniak, surveying the carnage left behind. His heart was heavy, for even amidst victory, the cost of life was stark. The bodies of his kin lay intermingled with those of the orcs, their once radiant faces pale under the morning sun. Giltharion rested nearby, his wounds tended by the healers of Lindon. Despite his pain, his sharp gaze found Elenion. "You linger too long, Elenion," the Elf Lord said, his voice steady despite his injuries. "The living call for your strength more than the fallen demand your grief." Elenion turned, sheathing his bloodied blades. "I cannot look away, my lord. If I do, I will forget the weight of this victory. It feels hollow, even now." Giltharion smiled faintly, though his face was pale. "The weight you carry is not hollow. It is the burden of all who would stand against the shadow. Let it guide you, not crush you. The fight is not done, and the days to come will demand your courage anew." The discovery of the shard. As the elves tended to the wounded and burned the orcish dead, a Sindar scout returned from the northern slopes of Niniak, his face grim. In his hands, he carried a broken shard of blackened steel, etched with fiery runes. "My lords," he said, kneeling before Giltharion and Elenion, "this was found near Grakthul's body. It is no common weapon. Its craft bears the taint of Angband." Giltharion's brow furrowed as he examined the shard. It hummed faintly with an unnatural heat, and the runes glowed like embers in the dark. "This is no relic of Angmar," Giltharion said. "It bears the mark of Morgoth himself. Such weapons should have been destroyed with the fall of Thangorodrim. This suggests that remnants of his malice endure, and those who wield them grow bold once more." Elenion stepped closer. "What does it mean for Lindon?" "It means," Giltharion replied, his voice grave, "that the shadow seeks to reclaim what remains of the elder days. If Morgoth's servants can fashion such weapons anew, then the strength of the West must be united before it is too late." The Council of Mithlond. In the weeks that followed, word of the battle and the discovery of the shard spread to the lords of Lindon. From Mithlond to Harlund, the Eldar gathered to council. Elrond Half-Elven himself came from Rivendell, bearing tidings of increasing unrest in Eriador. In the great hall of Mithlond, Giltharion stood before the assembled lords, his wounds yet healing but his spirit resolute. Elrond sat to his right, his piercing gaze steady, while Círdan the shipwright, his white beard like sea foam, listened in silence. "We face a threat not seen since the days of Angmar," Giltharion began. "The orcs of the north are rising, but their movements are no mere rabble. They are driven by a purpose that echoes of the First Age, and their arms are forged with malice older than our memories. Elrond rose, his deep voice filling the chamber. If the shadow stirs again, it will not be content with Lindon alone. All of Eriador may fall if we do not act swiftly. Yet we cannot act blindly. The shard must be studied, its origin traced. Only then can we understand the depth of this threat. Círdan nodded, his voice like the roll of distant waves. The wisdom of Valinor has not abandoned us. Let the shard be sent to the wise in Imladris. In the meantime, the havens will fortify their defenses. The gray ships may yet be needed for more than ferrying our people to the west. A growing darkness. As the council dispersed, Elenion was approached by Elrond. The young warrior bowed, but Elrond motioned for him to rise. "You fought bravely at Niniak," Elrond said. "Your deeds are sung already in Rivendell, yet I see in you a shadow that does not come from battle alone." Elenion hesitated. "The shard, my lord. Its presence chills me. I felt it on the ridge, even before it was found. It is as though it called to me." Elrond's gaze sharpened. "Such relics are dangerous, not only in their use but in their very existence. If it speaks to you, then it seeks to ensnare your heart. You must guard yourself, for even the strongest have fallen to the whisper of darkness." The path ahead. That night, Elenion stood on the docks of Mithlond, gazing out at the endless sea. The stars of Varda shimmered above, but the peace they brought felt distant. He knew that his life had been irrevocably altered. The battle at Niniak was only the beginning, a prelude to a greater war that loomed unseen. Giltharion joined him, leaning heavily on a staff. "You are troubled, my friend," the Elf Lord said. Elenion nodded. "I feel as though the shadow watches me. Even now, with Grakthul dead and the shard locked away, I cannot shake its weight." "Then let it be a reminder," Giltharion said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You are not alone in this fight. The light of the Eldar endures, as long as there are those willing to carry it. We are the stewards of that light, Elenion. Remember that." The gathering storm. Far to the north, beyond the remnants of Angmar, a dark figure stirred in the depths of the misty mountains. Cloaked in shadow, it gazed upon a crude map etched into the stone, marking Lindon, Rivendell, and other lands of the west. "The shard has been found," the figure murmured, its voice a rasping hiss. "Good. Let the elves believe they have gained a victory. The true war begins now." A deep growl echoed from the darkness, and the flickering light of a fire revealed a gathering of twisted forms, orcs, trolls, and worse. They awaited their master's command, and so the shadow gathered strength, even as the Eldar prepared to defend the fading light.